Now our event will officially begin right now. So this is from CI Institute, from Confucius Institute, Ljubljana. Our Confucius Institute is committed to organizing various events that create dynamic interaction and profound cultural communication between Slovenia and China. Today's CI Business Talk is an excellent example. And today we have the very great honor to invite Labbrand Group. It's an international consulting corporation and its headquarters is in Shanghai. So today we have a guest who is from Shanghai. And today's CI Business Talk, the topic is 4 keys to successful strategic communication in China. And I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Sarah. Sarah, could you say hi to everyone, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah. So nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining today. I am broadcasting from China. I will go ahead and share my screen and I'll wait for the go and then we can dive right in.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. While you're doing that, let me briefly introduce Sarah. Sarah is a senior digital strategist at Labbrand, headquartered in Shanghai. She has experience managing strategic brand communication for over 60 major brands in the Chinese market. She has managed the market entry strategy and a social media communication strategy for various brands in China that has reached over 300 million exposures and created award-winning campaigns in Chinese market. Thank you for sharing your passion, Sarah, today for the international business and branding strategies with us. So without further ado, could you keep introducing your company to us and yourself a little bit, and we will dive into your topics. And during the keynote speaking, I will collect the questions from the audience for you. After your keynote speaking, we will have a session, it's called Q&A. I will forward all these questions to you, right? If these questions are in Slovenian, my colleague, Asha and Gaia, they will help me and pass forward these questions. And all the audience, I will say good morning, good afternoon, good evening one more time. If we have not got a chance to ask your question during the session, we will definitely pass forward all these questions to Sarah and the connection will be bounded. Thank you. The floor is yours, Sarah.
Hello, thank you so much for joining. So thank you so much for that introduction. I am Sarah, and a little bit about myself. I am originally from the USA. I'm actually from Texas, and I am very passionate about branding, globalization, localization in the China market. I have been working and living in China for the past 4+ years and have been working in branding, strategic communication, marketing, social media management, advertising in the China market for both international and Chinese brands. And it's definitely a passion point of mine. And I am so excited to share my experience about this topic today. Yes, and please do not feel shy to ask any questions. I hope to have some participation and really hear from you, and hope to address any curiosities, any comments that you have throughout the presentation. So please feel free to drop in the comment box as I present. So today we're going to talk about navigating the modern Silk Road of digital China, some introductory thoughts and some interesting statistics about China today and the environment of China today. And then we will dive right into what I consider to be the 4 success factors to master strategic communication in China. And then we'll also be looking at some best practices and learning and get some inspiration. And before I continue, I also, of course, need to speak on behalf of my company, Labbrand Group, which is a branding agency in China, a consultancy that specializes in helping brands with their strategic communication in China, among other things, such as brand naming, research, visual identity, social media communication, and whatnot. And Labbrand Group has been in China since 2005 and has is definitely a thought leader in this topic today. So I am so excited to be presenting on behalf of my company. We can go in. So we all are familiar with the Silk Road. We know that this is the ancient road that China has had with the rest of the world, connecting global trade for a very, very long time. So it's interesting to see how we actually see a modern rendition of this today. And what's really going to activate that, of course, is technology. And what we see is unprecedented business and cross-border collaboration between China and the rest of the world. We are really in an era of globalization, which is very exciting. And there's lots of opportunities to be unlocked from this time, which is very exciting. What makes this topic extremely topical today. So what is the opportunity of China? So we know that China has a huge GDP. This is no secret to anyone. So this is honestly the essence of China's opportunity, right? There's such a huge population, and hence there's many, many economic opportunities to be unlocked, especially with the rapid rise of China. Very exciting. And if we think about trade strength just as a KPI, a key point indicator that represents China's opportunity, China accounts for actually 17% of global trade. And this is compared with just 4% 20 years ago. So it's really a special time. And many of the cross-border collaborations that you'll see in China have developed throughout these past 20 years. And the case studies that we'll be drawing from are very recent. And this is a very interesting point to really show the size and strength of China today. And in addition to just the size and this rapid expansion in the economy, there's another point that I want to emphasize, which is about innovation. And China has a very special culture of innovation when it comes to business. In fact, 2.5% of China's gross domestic product value is devoted to spending on research and development to keep optimizing the way that business is done. Some interesting facts would be that 32% of Chinese companies have adopted artificial intelligence, and 38% of global 5G patents are from Chinese companies, just to look at a few facts that indicate this. And if we want to summarize this, I think we can really see China as a very strategically important country as a market to the Chinese consumers, of course, as a supplier, having cross-border collaboration and supplying outside of China, exporting, also being a source of innovation with many innovative companies, and a global partner in general. So this is the perspective of the keynote today. And it's really focused on making that business to business key connection and how to really approach that in China. So China is a very, very interesting place because, as I just mentioned, we're in this era of globalization, unprecedented globalized business. But at the same time, China is very much self-contained, very self-sufficient. And this will show itself through a very distinct digital environment that is separate from the rest of the world. Of course, a very strong culture, very strong business culture. So it's a very distinct place. And so while we're in this era of globalization, it's also extremely necessary to have a specialized approach to the China market for these reasons. So if we want to look at the digital ecosystem, you might have seen some of these apps before, but in all likelihood, you've probably maybe never seen most of them. And that's because they are apps that are just for the China market. Of course, we know Facebook and Instagram, and China basically has its own version of all these apps and then some. So we can see the digital landscape being self-contained in this way, and something that operates independently from the rest of the world. Yes, so this is one of the reasons why, yeah, it's very important to have a specialized approach when it comes to China. And it's also interesting to note that we see a transition from traditional PR to what we call the modern China way. So in the past, it might be some straightforward types of messaging, sort of one-way engagement, things that are difficult to track. If we think about traditional PR, that might be email marketing, things like this. But what we see in China is much more dynamic, usually involving very creative content, lots of two-way engagement, very direct, very rapid types of connections, and things that are easily tracked as well. So this is another point about China's innovation, very technologically savvy in this way and very futuristic. And oftentimes what we see happening in China will be what will precede what's happening in the rest of the world. So even if we're not actually doing direct business in China, we still have a lot to learn just from the modern China way and all of the advanced apps and ecosystem that's happening in China today. So there might be different stages that you would be when embarking on a strategic communication in the China market. So you might be wanting to attract opportunities, that might be finding some win-win business collaborations. You could be building a sphere of influence in China, so networking among Chinese audiences, building your connections, and building your brand influence, and of course strengthening your brand image, and really being strategic when creating a brand aura and attracting and resonating with Chinese consumers in the Chinese market. So how do we really attract opportunities in China? We've been thinking about this question, and in my time, I have identified 4 key aspects that really are essential to having strategic communication in China, essential to attracting opportunities. So the first one is being present, being here in the China market, and we'll talk about what that means, how to be present. Second of all, it's extremely important to be relevant to Chinese consumers, relevant to your industry. And thirdly, it's very important to be respectful. And this is where a lot of companies can actually go wrong. And so we'll talk about what it means to have a respectful image and create respectful networking in the China market, and what that specifically means for China. And then the 4th key is to actually be representative of where you're coming from. Because we're in this era of globalization, oftentimes doing business in China can be very representative of your whole country's collaboration with China as a country itself. So I'll be breaking down each of these points one by one, and we'll also be talking about some case studies from the market, case studies from things that I've worked on in the past. And this will be the main structure of today's presentation. So first, we'll talk about what it means to be present in the China market. So if you're not aware, China is the biggest online community in the world. Of course, with such a population, this might come as no surprise, but it's interesting that we can note China's population is so huge and people are always on the internet, and especially using mobile as well. And that makes it the largest online community. And that also means that our approach to being present in the China market will largely be, of course, through the internet. And when we say a lot of people in China are netizens, they are citizens of the net. this is very interesting. We see that there's over 1 billion active internet users, and people spend an average of 6.6 hours online daily, which is much higher than other countries' averages. And so it's important to note that not only are a lot of people online, it's also the culture to be online more often and to rely on it as a primary form of communication. So I mentioned earlier that in China, there's very specific apps that are different from the rest of the world. And when we're thinking about them, I want to highlight a few platforms that would be pretty much essential to creating these connections in the China market. So we can start with the fundamentals. The first would be having a Chinese website. And if you're not aware, China has what's sometimes referred to as a great firewall, meaning that some platforms, some websites are actually blocked in China. And so this in its own right is going to create a very unique system, and that's why it's very important to even just be aware of your website. Where is it hosted in China? And is it available on Baidu, which is sort of equivalent to Google or Bing in the Western world? And within fundamentals, you'll also see this green icon here, which is WeChat. And WeChat is sort of like another internet ecosystem in China in some ways. People will search things on WeChat the way we might use Google. However, the difference is that WeChat is also connected to daily communication. Meaning that instead of using your text app or just using your phone number to message people, people will actually rely on WeChat as the #1 way of communication. So that's why these are on the left side, because they are essential to proving legitimacy in the China market. Any player in the China market should basically have these platforms as a baseline. But then we'll also talk about amplifying connections, other social media platforms. So you'll see these icons here. This is Weibo, and this is one called Xiaohongshu, which has an English name of Red, which would be similar to things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And then, of course, we know the short video sharing platforms. We're probably familiar with TikTok, and which is a Chinese company. And in Chinese, that is called Douyin. And even though it is a Chinese company that, of course, we're all familiar with globally around the world, actually the app in China is a completely independent system. So if you had a TikTok account, people in China would not actually be seeing this. It actually acts as a completely independent app and should be approached as such. And then you'll see this one on the right here, this orange one with wings. This is a part of WeChat, and it's the video sharing platform connected to WeChat. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means as we go through. And these apps here are very essential to amplifying your connections. So we lay it out in this way because you want to have your fundamentals, you want to prove your legitimacy as a company wanting to make an impact in the China market, and then to really amplify connections, increase your chances of creating that strategic connection and having a very strategic network in China. You'll want to be using these apps that really open your sphere in the China market. So let's talk about WeChat, which I mentioned a little bit briefly. So there's 1.24 billion active users. So a vast majority of the population is on WeChat, and it is essential to daily life here. People spend on average at least 82 minutes each day on WeChat. So that's a very long time, over an hour on this app. Daily active users for so many users. So it's used for day-to-day messaging. You might be familiar with WhatsApp. So it sort of acts as this type of app. So day-to-day messaging. It's also where you would look up news articles, look up businesses, look up things, as I mentioned earlier, might even be using it as you would Google or Bing. It's also social posting. So you might be posting on like your Facebook moments, right? Updating your status. And so it also works in this way. And then it's also an e-commerce platform. So people pay with WeChat as well. It's also like basically your credit card, but through QR codes within this app as well. And what's very interesting is that this app has all of these features. And so that means if I would read an article or something, then I would very easily be able to forward it to my friend. Or maybe I see their post and it's very easy to forward that. Or I have my business and people can pay me directly, order things directly through this app. So that's why we call this a super app, because in China, this one is essential. Everyone has WeChat and it's used for everything. If you didn't have a WeChat, you would have a very hard time just surviving in China. And on top of this, WeChat is a tool for business to business communication. And this is very interesting, very distinct about this app. So we might be familiar with WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger sending messages, but what's very distinct about WeChat is people are going to be using this for their business connections. And this is part of the habits and the norms in the China market. In fact, 70% of Chinese users rely on WeChat for work over email. Email is sort of antiquated in China in some ways. Of course, some people are still using email, but actually more often than not, people are actually going to be using WeChat in the same way that you would be using email in your company. And so people are using it to communicate with clients, suppliers, colleagues, get professional information, do research about your industry. So it's a very, very important B2B tool in this way. And I also mentioned earlier about WeChat video channels. So this type of app is connected to WeChat. So it's all contained within this ecosystem, but it's sort of like TikTok within WeChat. And so if you're going to amplify your connections using this type of short video platform is very strategic. This will help make your brand more discoverable and also accelerate your networking funnel. So WeChat is designed in an interesting way where you're friends with your circle and you're going to see what they post, right? And you're going to be chatting back and forth with people you know on WeChat. This aspect of WeChat, the short video sharing platform, WeChat channels, is going to actually make your account more visible to the rest of the audience on WeChat. So in this way, WeChat is what's called a closed system. So you'd only see what your friends post, but then WeChat video channels actually opens that. So it's an important aspect of the app as well. We can also talk about Weibo. Weibo is oftentimes compared to Twitter. So it's a platform that's very essential for sharing business news, industry news, having something relevant to say, being part of the conversation. So it's very key for following your company or your industry, what's hot in China, what is the zeitgeist for your industry in the China market. Using Weibo is essential for this type of research and also putting your message out there and following what's hot in the China market, trending topics, things like this. Red, which in Chinese is going to be called 小红书, which is little red book. This one is oftentimes compared to Instagram. So there's an emphasis on lifestyle content, leaving reviews. It's very pictorial in its user experience. And this one's especially important for building brand communities. It's going to be key for having influencers, key opinion leaders, and building a community around your brand. So you're going to have increased contact with consumption circles. So especially if you're having a company that's going to be marketing to the consumers in China, this one's very essential for that. And also there's an emphasis on company reviews. So that's some very important points about 小红书. And when we talk about proving legitimacy on Chinese social media, this is something that's pretty interesting. You must have a registered official business account. This is true for all of the platforms discussed. And you might be familiar with Twitter, like you have a blue check mark, right? If you're a legitimate person, it tells you, you know, you're the person you're saying you are. In China, this any company needs to have this. And in fact, if you don't have that, it's going to look not so legitimate. And this is maybe different actually from which is true in Western circles, where it's maybe easier to acquire the blue check mark. We might be familiar with some of the catastrophes on Twitter recently, changing the policies about the blue check mark. This could not be the more opposite scenario in China. It's very, very official and actually linked to some kind of laws even that needs to be verified. So this is just a view of what you would see from in WeChat as a Chinese user. You're going to maybe vet a company, see what it's like, and you'll see, oh, this is an official WeChat account. Whereas if someone doesn't have that, you're not going to have so much legitimacy in the China market. And this is just an example of what that looks like from Douyin, from that backend. So there's a more extensive verification application process. This is very important for setting up any kind of social media and being present in the China market online. So what you'll want to do is have a registered official business account. You'll want to have a findable Chinese domain name. So yeah, oftentimes that means it being in Chinese, having something very easily findable, of course. And you'll want to develop your feed to have a substantial history of posts to show that you're active. You'll want to, of course, increase your followers. This is very essential to proving legitimacy in Chinese social media. And you'll see that on the left here, this is an example from Vodafone, a New Zealand telecom company that's active in the China market. That might be for business to business, or maybe catering to Chinese patrons. But we are using them just to show as an example of having these registered official accounts. So when it comes to building your presence in China, you'll definitely want to be findable. Allow people to reach you. So oftentimes this would be through WeChat and connected through all of these social medias, of course. You'll want to introduce yourself and your brand to China and approach it in this way. Everything should be custom and the message should be localized for China. This is what's key to proving you're a legitimate player. You're actually here in China. You want to do business. You can be trusted, and prove that you're serious about China, that you're worth collaborating with and doing business with. Next, we can talk about being relevant to the China market. So of course, being present is already going to make you more relevant in the China market, being findable, all these things mentioned, but we're going to get a little bit more detailed about what it means to really be relevant in the China market. This is an interesting visual, and I really like it because it symbolizes something about the China market. You don't want to approach would be in some ways. We're not super familiar with all of these apps and all these things, and maybe not so familiar with China. But of course, to really have strategic communication, you want to be talking language and talking like as an outsider or a foreigner. You want to be approaching China with a lot of relevancy. And this often means to find your overlap. So oftentimes what I find is a brand wants to attract strategic communication, attract opportunities in China, and they'll talk about what their company does. They'll talk about their business all over the world, but it doesn't have anything to do with China. And so it's very important to do this in some creative way or another to really identify your overlap. And this is key to building relevance, which is going to be key to building up your network in China. So this is an interesting example. This is from Telekom Serbia, which is the largest telecom company in Serbia, and a company that I've been working with and helping in the China market for quite some time. This is just an interesting example of some social media posts that we did where we actually collaborated with a Serbian artist. And why did we collaborate with this Serbian artist? Because he actually specialized in a Chinese painting style and is known in the China market, already has some posts about him in on Chinese social media. And so we highlight him and collaborate with him because this is an example of having some overlap, right? You might have, Chinese painting style, the Serbian artist, and then that's where we build that relevant message and showcasing the friendship between these countries, the collaboration between these countries, really, really making your country or your company relevant to China as a content piece. This is another very interesting one. This is also for Telecom Serbia. We also collaborated with a Chinese photographer who has actually done projects in Serbia, photographing Serbia. And so we also collaborate. And this is another example of some overlap. And so you can see that this might seem kind of random. You might feel like, oh, my company, my country, I have no idea how to make myself relevant to China. What do I have to do with China? So you can be creative in finding these points where you actually get some overlap here. So you'll basically want to build relevance, highlighting moments of cultural synergy. Here is another interesting example of Chilean cherries. And this is the Chilean Cherry Exporter Association in China, from Chile, and some campaigns that they've done in the China market, selling their cherries in the China market. They did this very interesting campaign called Enjoy Your Red Moment. And if you don't know, in China, red is a very important color. It symbolizes prosperity. And it's a very important color, especially around Chinese New Year. And so, which happens to be the time that Chilean cherries are in season. So they make this their tagline. They make this the theme to really highlight some relevance to the Chinese market and represent Chilean cherries as something that has a cultural symbolic meaning in China. Yes. Yeah, 西风正当红, enjoy your red moment. And what's very interesting is you can see that since launching this campaign, Chile actually became the foremost supplier of fresh fruit to China. And this is actually even more so than Southeast Asia, very significant. And this is something that happened quite recently, right? You can see here on the right side, the rise of the export to China by year has gone up. So this bar in red shows this rapid rise until 2021 at least, and then today that would be even more so. So very, very successful campaign. And what I actually think is another very interesting key indicator of the success of this campaign is that this has actually built true relevance in the China market, because Chilean cherry freedom, this hashtag, actually became a trending topic in China, sort of representing the ability to buy this imported fruit. People are actually talking about it. And many people having conversations about it and comments about this. And so this is an incredible case study of making the brand very relevant and really entering the conversation and having a reputation in the China market. So just to recap, we highly recommend, when establishing relevance to the China market, associate your brand with potent Chinese symbols. And if we want to zoom in a little bit, we can look at some other tactics. So symbols is one. That's the fourth one. You would also maybe highlight your brand activity, of course, in China or with other Chinese companies. Maybe if you're working for a company that's collaborated with another Chinese company, definitely mention that. Very important. Talk about shared values between your company and the values of Chinese culture. Find these moments of cultural synergy. And yes, associate yourself with these symbols. Very key to building relevance and attracting strategic communication in the China market. Another point that I have to make here is Chinese is a very distinct language, of course, and this means that just translating your message, maybe what you're using for other markets, will definitely not be enough in the China market. It's something that really needs to be addressed with some localization. And I want to highlight this interesting example from Citibank. So Citibank is a American bank and operating in China. And they need to create a slogan, something that's relevant, something that will resonate in the China market. And they do a very interesting thing because they're using some literary devices in Chinese that make the brand very relevant and potent in China. And so their slogan roughly translates to invest in bonds all over the world and gain wealth at ease. This might sound a little funky and weird in English, but in Chinese it sounds great. And one reason why is because it's referencing a Chinese idiom. So 心安理得. This means to have prosperity and wealth, and it's having a similar pronunciation to this idiom. So very, very clever to build relevance, talking about something that Chinese consumers already know, and creating this association. Another thing that you'll notice about this slogan is that it's balanced. To me, this is a very interesting component of literature in China when it comes to expressing things like slogans or poems or sayings and greetings. There's an emphasis on having some type of balance. So in this case, we see 6 and 6. Oftentimes you'll see 4 and 4, 2 and 2, 8 and 8. And having this type of structure in Chinese is something that's going to sound really good to Chinese people. So when building relevance, you'll want to construct your slogan in a way that references things in Chinese culture, that is communicated in a way that emphasizes some deeper understanding of the China market. Another thing you can do, some other tactics to go over, would be using nicknames or slangs, things that are very native for Chinese speakers. Increase this intimacy, really not sound like an outsider, right? Using the language, the native language that's commonly used. Using what's called a chengyu, or a Chinese idiom. This is what we saw in the Citibank example, but Chinese is a very interesting language because there's so many sayings that are very common phrases, and they have a very special lingual significance in Chinese. You can also incorporate some clever wordplay. So you might have some abridged phrases, the way things rhyme, a homonym. So some words that sound like another word. These are very attractive literature devices in the China market, help building relevance. And then, as we mentioned earlier, having some balanced phrasing, really talking like a native, very essential. And of course, you're going to want to think about what is relevant in the China market. That could be for your industry, but that would also be having to do with the time of year, like holidays or news stories, maybe events that are only happening in China, and things that are going to be hot topics. Chinese celebrities, Chinese movies, Chinese history, even memes. So you'll basically want to connect your brand with these things that are going to be relevant in the mental map of Chinese people, of course. So to recap all the points about relevance, establishing your presence, first of all, and then here relevance, you'll want to find some overlap between your brand and China. Of course, talk like a native, and also reference things that are very current and shared knowledge among people in China. Next, we can talk about being respectful in the China market. This one is very interesting because of course, we know our basic practices of being respectful in general, things that are going to apply no matter where you are. But in China, because of the information being such a self-contained network, and the structure of China also being closely tied to the government, this is actually going to create sort of different rules for what it means to be respectful. This is an interesting case study, or what I actually call an anti-case study in the China market. And it's actually a huge scandal that happened. Basically, H&M, among other companies, released some statements talking about cotton from the region, the western region in China known as Xinjiang. and basically talking about some sort of human rights allegations, some scandal here. Now, for the Western world, this is something that we'd be able to find on Google and read about. But the news and what's considered the truth in China is actually maybe different. So this is very, very, very important to be aware of what is considered politically correct in China. And I know this is a sensitive topic, but purely just thinking of business, we actually see H&M, for example, really tanking. I remember being in China during this time and everyone talking about it and seeing all of the H&M's clothes right before my eyes. And it's really incredible how fast and how rapidly that happened. And it's because they did not show respect. People were actually very offended of these allegations. And you can see Uniqlo, who is aware of what's politically correct, meanwhile takes the market share. And this is just one example. Many, many foreign companies have messed up in China, disrespecting Chinese audiences in some way or another. And I think examples might seem very innocuous. With the H&M example, that might seem like something politically charged, like might seem like, okay, yes, that's sort of obvious, don't say these things. But sometimes brands will be doing things that don't seem to be that bad on the surface, maybe from our perspective, but in China actually can be very, very offensive. So you can see some examples here of some luxury brands not referring to Hong Kong or Macau or Taiwan as being part of China. This is a very, very sensitive topic. Like you can see on this Gap t-shirt for the China market, they do not include Taiwan on this map. That's very, very offensive, showing lots of disrespect in the China market. There were some politically charged events in Hong Kong. NBA coach actually post something on Twitter talking about how he supports Hong Kong protests. And this might seem like it shouldn't matter too much, right? Because this is Twitter, and people in the Western audience are going to maybe like resonate with one message. But NBA is actually a huge industry in China. Many, many huge mega fans of NBA, and after this message, season completely cut. So these are just some examples that have had huge business impact in a bad way in the China market, just from not understanding what it means to be respectful in the China market. And I know some of this might sound controversial, but this is just the truth and something that has to be acknowledged in order to really successfully cater to the China market. Yes, you can see some of these headlines of these companies apologizing. So how do we show respect? That's a little bit negative, but on the positive side, we can embrace something called guochao. In Chinese, guo means country and chao means wave. So this word is sort of like a tidal wave of China, of the country, and it's meaning something like national pride, having an embrace of made in China. And so this is very interesting because this is what's actually informing the modern way of thinking in the China market. Some interesting examples would be showing off collaborations with Chinese companies. So you can see this is the National Museum of China collaborating with KFC. So really showing some respect, embracing these cultural institutions in China, celebrating Chinese holidays, of course. This is an example from Dove. And also referencing China's rich history. There's so much to draw from. Of course, China's super old country, lots and lots of facets of culture. And so it's really a special time to get creative and reference these things, appreciate these things with some rich historical context. And if you can do this in a productive way, then that can be major for your brand in China and a huge indicator of showing respect and building business in the China market. Here's an interesting example. This is ICBC and MasterCard having a credit card for the China market. So on these MasterCard credit cards using the Chinese zodiac symbol, special edition. So embracing the ancient Chinese culture. These are symbols of what Chinese characters would look like in the ancient days. So including this type of thing, this is a very nuanced cultural icon to be referencing, a great way to show respect and also build relevance in the China market. So to conclude, just some points about respect: need to be politically correct. This is crucial, as we've seen from some of these anti-case studies. Also embracing patriotic China, as I mentioned with Guochao, collaborating with Chinese companies, and of course, as you're building presence in the China market, especially online, talking, listening to people who are being social on your socials. Respond and listen. All of these things are key to showing respect and going to be key for having successful business in the China market. Lastly, we can talk about being representative. So when I say representative, what I mean is when you're doing business in China, you're actually doing something a little bit bigger than just your company. You're showcasing your home country's synergy with China on even a more diplomatic level. Because China's self-contained and because of the structure of Chinese business being tied with government institutions, doing business in China can actually represent something a lot bigger about the country as a whole. And here I also like to emphasize a very interesting cultural observation that we need to take into account for anything in the China market, which is that China is what's called high context. And if you're not aware, this is a index that people will measure cultural differences between different countries. So in a lot of Western countries, you'll look at one thing and it's the point of view is to have an isolated understanding of this entity. But in China, it's all about having a very holistic understanding. And when doing business, you think about what it represents, who are you talking to, all of these implications, and having a very broad view. And so it's crucial to take into account the broader context of what it really means when doing business with China. And I want to showcase a best practice from Telecom Serbia. We already showed some of their interesting points building relevance on social media, but now we'll look at a little bit more holistically about how Telecom Serbia has attracted opportunities in the China market by being representative of Serbia itself as a country. So our driving communication point for Telecom Serbia is to emphasize the steel-like friendship and connection. And we have this hook of connection, and we use this word called chao. And in Chinese, chao means bridge, so symbolizing bridging connection. So it's understood as a metaphor for this established friendship between Serbia itself and China. And so in this way, Telecom Serbia is not just representing their company, but they're actually letting their company being sort of like an ambassador of Serbia as a whole. And in this case, this is very, very strategic because Serbia, like many other Eastern European countries, have an amazing relationship diplomatically with China. And this is definitely something that can be emphasized and capitalized on when attracting these opportunities and building your sphere of influence in the China market. So you can see we're using this chao. This is some examples of some of the posters that we've made for the Chinese social media for Telecom Serbia, emphasizing this positioning in the China market, utilizing this hook of connection. This is from Weibo, the social media that we covered earlier, and also emphasizing Huawei collaboration, because Huawei in the eyes of people in China is a point of pride and representing China as a whole, being such a huge company. And then Huawei working with Telecom Serbia, which is representing Serbia as a whole. And so having this connection and emphasizing the diplomatic relationship is also showcased through the business relationship. Yeah, so interesting to note some of our communication points for Telecom Serbia. We talk about, of course, company news, but we also talk about Serbian theater, right? So Telecom Serbia has a lot of shows that have licensing opportunities in China. And so when we're communicating in the China market, we like to represent not just the TV shows, but also Serbia's film industry and the tradition of film in Serbia as a whole, and build these connotations to strengthen the association with Serbia, to create a holistic understanding and strengthening of the attractiveness of Telecom Serbia in China. We also talk about industry connections. So that might be diplomatic relationships, maybe between the president and or ambassadors. So we talk about these things. This is relevant because we're representing the whole country actually. And this could also mean showing the other business collaborations between other Serbian companies and Chinese companies, and emphasizing this as a communication point. And also just talking about things like Serbian culture. So that might be something with food or tennis. Some of these things just really approaching the China market as being a representative of the country. If your country has a good relationship with China, this is going to be a huge benefit. And we can see some indicators of success. So many followers on our Weibo. Actually, this number has increased since then. This is 2022. Now we're approaching 20,000. Many views on the profile, and lots of love coming to the account. And things that we'll even be pointing out things about Serbia as well as the company itself. And this was also a special point when Telecom Serbia made its China debut and actually became part of the Serbian pavilion at an art festival in China in the city of Nanjing. And so you can see in this way, instead of having a pavilion or a space at this festival just representing the company, actually joining forces with other Serbian companies to represent Serbia as a whole. Because promoting Serbian business with China is going to only be a benefit and a very essential point to be considering when considering the collaboration between companies from these two countries. So to recap here, to really represent your country and use that as a strategic point, you want to celebrate your synergy between your home country and China, whatever that means, and introduce your country's culture to China, and position the industry as a strength in your country. So you can think about what countries are known for. Maybe like some countries are known for fashion or food or different industries, for example. So whatever industry you're in, talking about that as a specialty of your country is going to be some holistic information that can be representative and helping your strategic communication as a whole. Yes, so this is to recap all of the points. So being present, especially on online resources and online platforms in the China market, as we mentioned, building relevance, being respectful, and representing your home country. And that is all I have for today. And we can go ahead and begin our question and answer session. Thanks so much for attending, and please don't be shy to leave some comments in the Zoom chat, and we can go ahead and start with our questions.